There we go, and it's recording. Hello, everyone. We've just about started. Everyone is here. We'll let the attendees trickle in, and then we'll get started. Don't worry, I'm not going to be the one moderating this. It's going to be Addie. You'll have more fun. But I will be around, so you know, just in case. So we'll give it a minute more, and then Addie, you'll take it away. Let's take it away at 3:04.
Okay.
I do want to clarify that we are recording, so even if people come in late, they won't miss the early part. We should be fine. Also, that this is a webinar, so all the attendees are automatically on mute. And I will also go on mute once we kick it off.
All right, it says 4 on my computer, so I'm gonna go for it.
Go for it. Thank you.
Hi, Wyatt, welcome. And first, just huge thanks to Mona and Ale and Pierce, who set this all up and have sort of spearheaded the initiative of having Tech Talk. So this is the first Tech Talk, and I'm really grateful to you guys for making this happen. I'm gonna facilitate the first half of the conversation today, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions that come up as we're talking, you can pop those in the Q&A box at the bottom. So yeah, here we go. Welcome, Wyatt. Thank you so much for being here today with us. It's a great way to start the summer series, or the school year series of Tech Talks, by just kind of cutting to the chase and talking about flying cars. So I'm just gonna sort of give a quick on your background, and then hopefully you'll really flesh it out as we talk more. So Wyatt leads the commercial partnerships at Uber Elevate. He focuses on developing key manufacturing, supplier, investor, infrastructure, and enabling technology relationships to support the Uber Air vision. Prior to joining Uber, Wyatt served as a management consultant at McKinsey & Company, where he worked in the public sector, high-tech, and capital-intensive industry practices. Wyatt holds an MBA with distinction from Harvard Business School and a bachelor's from Vanderbilt University. And I was very excited to also learn that you did Teach for America.
Yep.
Thanks for being here. I guess first I have to ask about flying cars. So what is it like?
Yeah, certainly. Well, let me start by saying thank you, Addie, for inviting me to join. All of us at Uber are really excited for the chance to share more about our vision for the future of urban mobility and how we think about our mission as a company. So it's a really fun experience to be a part of this tech talk and to help kick off the series for Cornell Tech for the school year. So I lead business development for Elevate, which is our big bet to be able to accelerate the future of urban air mobility. And it is an effort to bring flying cars to life, to your point. So we would say that they are better helicopters, electric powered vertical takeoff and landing air vehicles, and flying car can be a bit of a misnomer, but it is definitely a term that has caught a lot of people's attention in the media and in the public. And so that's something that we're excited always to talk about. To answer your question directly, I would say it's really special and a privilege to be a part of the team that is working to bring together an ecosystem that will help to accelerate a new form of mobility that will fundamentally change the way that society works and will help provide a supplement to the many forms of mobility that exist on the ground inside large cities across the world, to help folks move in a safe and reliable and fast, clean, and affordable way. And so our team is excited to carry that baton for Uber.
Really cool. You've probably been in one of these eVTOLs. Is that fair? To say?
I have. So
What it's like?
to level set with everyone a little bit about eVTOLs. These vehicles, and you can see a rendering of one here behind me that we've released to the public, and you can go to uber.com/air and see much more about them. They are a form of aircraft that is powered by something called distributed electric propulsion. And distributed electric propulsion is a technology that has been pioneered at NASA for over 3 decades. It is not new to people in the aviation community, but for one of the first times, it is deployable in a certified air vehicle product today due to advances in battery technology, as well as opportunities like those presented by ride-sharing companies such as Uber to drive much more utilization of vehicles than historically has been possible in private aviation. And so we at Uber are a technology company. We're not an aircraft manufacturer. So we are partnered with some leading firms across the world who do have best-in-class engineering capabilities to take that on. And so firms like Boeing, Embraer, Bell, which are legacy providers who have got lots of experience certifying vehicles, as well as some companies that have extremely innovative tech, are a little bit newer in terms of their incorporation, but have got some really experienced engineers on board. Companies like Joby Aviation, which is based in California, as well as companies like Overair, based in the Los Angeles area, as well as some that are outside of the United States, like Pipistrel in Slovenia, all working on this concept of DEP. So really quickly, like, why is it different than a helicopter? Helicopters are vehicles that exist today, but they are very expensive to operate because they have lots of parts that require very high maintenance levels to be able to operate safely. And they also are very noisy. And so anyone that's been around helicopters before probably has observed that it's quite disruptive to a community. The unlock of distributed electric propulsion is that it's a much simpler set of mechanics that are operating on a series of electric motors that each are redundant, allowing for the vehicle to have multiple propellers that are in operation. And if there's ever a threat to one or more of them, the software on board the vehicle can rebalance across the airframe and allow for safe operation. Also, because you have that level of redundancy, it allows for a direct operating cost that's lower because the maintenance required for that is significantly below. So combine that with a much lower noise emission, and you have a vehicle that for the first time is deployable at scale inside cities. And so we at Uber are really excited to work with those manufacturers in a way to bring that to life.
Amazing. So just so you have the context, it's funny to me to be in this event where there's, I guess, dozens of people, but we can't see any of them. But so you have a sense of who's in the crowd. This talk was open to members of all of the Cornell Tech incoming classes, and so we have MBA students and law students who are focusing in tech law, and then a whole bunch of different engineering programs. And many people are coming straight out of undergrad. Can you give just a quick overview of what is business development? What's your job?
Yeah, certainly. So business development at Uber is a role that's focused very much around what are the new markets, what are the new opportunities, what are the new partnerships that we're able to form as a company to be able to accelerate our mission, which is to ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. And so in my context, our team is responsible for all the commercial partnerships of the Uber Elevate organization. And again, we're very focused on working with world-class companies on the aviation side. We're doing the same thing with companies on the infrastructure side. So capital providers, developers, operators of infrastructure assets in cities across the world are a big focus of our team, as well as enabling technologies in the supply chain that are going to be core for helping to bring this to life. The battery system is one we've talked about. There are others. And so the organization that I lead for Uber Elevate has got some world-class business development professionals who are responsible for setting the vision for partnerships that we're going to bring on board, prospecting companies we might want to work with to align our roadmaps and focus on ways in which we can support the effort to bring this technology to life. And then we put contractual agreements in place that obligate Uber to certain commitments and reciprocally our partners to commitments as well that helps bring that and make it real. So business development at Uber is very much focused on building for the future and being very creative as a problem solver to think about ways to unlock markets that don't yet exist. And to do that well requires bringing in all the capabilities that people in your program are honing. So questions about public policy, questions about tech readiness, questions about contractual viability, and problem solving in a creative way to build a vision for the future and excite people around it. And that's a really fun job.
And what brought you to that job? How did you come to work in business development and in the urban air mobility space?
Yeah, certainly. So Addie, as you mentioned, I've had a bit of an interesting path to get here. I was fortunate to be able to serve as a high school history teacher in Birmingham, Alabama years ago with Teach for America. It was a really challenging leadership experience, but one of the best things I've ever had a chance to do. That experience led to a bit of a focus around how to scale more macro impact on ways to make an impact in the world, and that led to business school, which was a great experience, and then ultimately to management consulting. So I worked at a firm called McKinsey & Company, focused on enterprise technology, public sector development, and capital-intensive industries like energy. Worked all over the world, had a really great experience, mostly based in San Francisco. And it was through a set of relationships that I developed at that time that I had the opportunity to help out on the sidelines for an emerging effort at Uber around urban air mobility. We published a white paper in the fall of 2016 outlining the different ways in which this market was coming together and how we believed at Uber we could play a role in helping to usher that along. That led to the decision to form an early team, and that's when I joined the organization, sort of in the middle of 2017. It's been a lot of fun building the group since then. I was, I think, the third or fourth employee to come in from the outside, and we've expanded significantly since then, and that's been a very fun experience.
Really cool. What do you think you would be doing if you hadn't gone to Uber?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I'm sure like a lot of people on this webinar, I've got a lot of excitement around entrepreneurship and have had for a long time. And so the chance to build things and to be a part of a community that's thinking about the world will exist in the future as opposed to how it exists today. So were I not at Uber, I likely would be inside an early stage company that was building something similar. And I think that one of the cool things about being in San Francisco has been the chance to be in a community with like-minded people who share that vision.
Makes sense. This is more of a technical question, getting down into the weeds, but really speaking also to the nature of the partnerships that you're kind of, I imagine, overseeing and sort of moving forward day to day as well. So I've very much enjoyed watching several of your various presentations that are available online from conferences and things like that Elevate has participated in. And it seems to me like eVTOLs or flying cars kind of are powered by these two breakthroughs, VTOL and then the electric distribution system, which I have a few more questions about later. But to start with the VTOLs, so I guess it sort of looks to me like a drone that's going up into the air, and then all the little drone wings like pivot and then it can fly forward, which is so cool. And you said in one of the talks that made it possible so that you can kind of like pop up into the air from the rooftops of city buildings and open lots and things like that. But also that you had worked with a partner to establish that you would be able to, on a 3-acre VTOL lot, move as much air traffic as the entire United States moves in a whole day, which I just was blown away by. Can you tell us about that research partnership and just kind of like who in the world and how does that connection form that you can come up with numbers like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely a bold vision, for the future. One that I would say is important to align people around for where we're going, and then there are a number of incremental steps to get there that are more modest in terms of the volume that they'll be able to deliver, but are very much aligned around scalability, which I think is an important design principle anytime you're operating in a high growth tech environment. So to break your question down, I'll answer in two pieces. The first is around the vehicles, and the second will be around the infrastructure. So in the vehicles themselves, you're exactly right. VTOL stands for vertical takeoff and landing. And VTOL is not new. Helicopters are VTOL aircraft, right? They can land vertically and they can take off vertically. What is new is the distributed electric propulsion component of how the vehicle both generates and then displaces energy. And so that's just something that is enabled because of improvements in battery technology, and specifically opportunities around specific energy density, getting to places where it can power human propulsion in a way that wasn't possible even 2 or 3 years ago. And so what's really interesting about this is that we can conceptualize how that vehicle can operate inside a system in a safe and reliable and highly scalable way because of the lower noise emission, because of the lower direct operating cost that I alluded to earlier. And that unlocks opportunity that just hasn't existed historically for being able to move people rapidly in and out of densely populated cities. So the second part of the question is, where would you land? Like how would infrastructure support the movement of people in that ecosystem? And then that leads to some really interesting questions about product design. So if you think about it, there are sort of limited areas inside densely populated cities where there's sufficient space to be able to facilitate those sorts of activities. And on top of that, many cities, as they've developed and grown over time, have had.
Wyatt, I can't hear you.
Am I back now?
Yes.
They've had a lot of questions about helicopters, noisy vehicles being disruptive. And so the opportunity really has been around this quieter vehicle that could operate at much higher rates inside those scarce rooftops of buildings or parking garages inside cities. So the render that you see behind me is an example of one where you can conceptualize a number of air vehicles that are landing, taxiing to a charging pad where passengers are egressing and ingressing. A pilot is giving a safety briefing, and then they're taxiing back out to another activity after 5 to 10 minutes of turn time. And so if you can conceptualize a rooftop of a building that has multiple pads on which people can land, vehicles can charge, people can load and unload, and then activities can cycle through, you can generate a lot of activities on a fairly small fixed amount of space that normally would require a long runway and much more space to operate those numbers of vehicles. And so we think that's a really exciting opportunity. We can start with existing aviation infrastructure that already is out there, helipads, things like that. And then over time, as the business model begins to take shape, it can expand.
Cool. So I want to ask about intrapreneurship. So I don't know how much you know about Cornell Tech, but like the core of the entire academic program is that from across all of the degree programs, we take integrated classes called Studio, where we're learning about how to build products across functions. And there's a one unit in that, in the Studio curriculum that's called Big Co Studio, and it's all about intrapreneurship and sort of driving innovation within larger companies. Does Uber see Elevate as formally as an intrapreneurship initiative?
We do. So I'll start by saying that I think the Big Co Studio program is a really exciting one. We were very pleased at Uber to sponsor a Big Co Studio project for a number of students last semester, and I was one of the sponsors of that. It was a great experience. We'd love the chance to do it again, assuming that we'll be invited back. And so I would say that there are a lot of parallels around that program and how it's structured with how we think about intrapreneurship, to your comment, inside of Uber. So the way we're structured is we are a fully integrated yet somewhat autonomous business unit within the bigger company. I'm employed by Uber Technologies. However, my team, Uber Elevate, reports to a single executive leader who's accountable to our CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi. That executive leader's name is Eric Allison. He's a very experienced engineer and leader of other companies inside this aerial ride sharing industry. And within our group, we have functions across engineering, both software and hardware, business development, functions around products, around design, around ways in which we can shape the broader narrative and story for this ecosystem, and things that are driving those partnerships that I alluded to. I also work really closely with my colleagues on the ride side of the Uber business. And I'm very aware of the challenges we're tackling there, and see this as a supplement to the vision that they have outlined for the future of mobility. That said, we're accountable for a series of objectives and key results that are specific to our team. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we show progress against them in a way that will drive this future business for Uber. So it's a fun experience. It's one that I think is an interesting way to think about startups, to have the support, resources, brand of a big company, but the flexibility, the nimbleness of a small one to be able to go out and make something happen in the world.
It's really cool. I really enjoyed the panel that I watched that you had done at your 2018 Uber Elevate Summit. So it was called Investment Opportunities in Urban Air Mobility. And it was basically you moderating a panel with a bunch of people investing in the urban air mobility space. The former SoftBank lead investor, Michael Bronin, said Uber is a great aggregator of capital and ideas and an enabler of capital flows. You guys are organizing the ecosystem in order to accelerate the inevitable future. And then other investor panelists described Uber's role as quote unquote underwriting demand for this new ecosystem. What does that mean? What does it mean that you kind of come in and your core function is underwriting demand?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks also for going back and watching some of those videos. I would encourage
everyone to watch it.
I would encourage everyone who's here, if you have some time and want to check it out. What Addie's alluding to is a series of ecosystem convening events that we host called Elevate Summit, and it brings together all the different innovators that are working on this technology, and a chance to talk about the state of the technology, the state of certification, the guidance coming from regulatory authorities, and the vision for how we'll bring this forward. And we're very open about it, so you can check it out online. So to the specific question you just asked, it was around this notion of underwriting demand. What does that mean? Uber is a big platform. We have over 100 million active monthly platform consumers as of December 2019, who are going to Uber to move themselves or move the things that they care about, delivering food or other items in markets all across the world. And so because we were able to service people in over 65 countries, because we've had over 15 billion trips to date on the platform, it allows us a lot of data about how people are moving through cities. Mm-hmm. And that data can be really powerful for thinking through the deployment of new technologies like eVTOLs. And so on our team, we have a system simulation function, which is a set of data scientists and software engineers who are building tools to simulate what the flows of people will look like in cities of the future. We've been very public about our ambition to launch this technology in North Texas, in Los Angeles, in the future in Melbourne, Australia. And we've been working over the course of the last several months on a project in New York City focused on a technology called Ubercopter, which is a product that maybe some of the folks in this line have had a chance to experience. Based on those software technologies and system simulation capabilities, we're able to project what a trade-off of time for money might look like for a rider inside New York City of the future, and be able to make some projection around where there would be optimal places to site infrastructure, as well as ways to think about the flows of people on this service. Based on that, we can go back to the manufacturers who have ambition to develop operating capabilities, and we can offer to them a vision for the number of vehicles, the number of flight hours, the compensation rate per hour of deployment that would lead to a really viable business for them.
So
and based on that,
you're giving
ahead,
them
Addie.
Statistics to sort of back up their business plan so that they can get funded?
Certainly, and then we're also willing to commit for those that are developing technologies that meet or exceed our mission specification on range, payload, speed, charge time, to say, here's how many vehicles we'd love to deploy. And we're going to enter into contracts that will go in and commit to those hours so that we can go and start this business.
Really cool. And then you guys must do a ton of work doing business modeling for your own Elevate business as well as the ecosystem as a whole. What's the role of your business development team in both building and utilizing those models?
Yeah, well, we benefit from having a lot of incredibly smart, creative, and talented people within the Uber Elevate organization to not just conceptualize of those models, but to run lots of simulations to be able to derive data that we then can use to build those analytical tools. So our business development team is fairly lean. We're a group that's more focused on being able to set a vision for the future and then work externally with those partners and internally with the data scientists and cross-functional groups that are working to build out those models to be able to say probabilistically what the use would look like. And so I would say that the skill set that is important to hone to do that well is akin to one of product management, of thinking through like, what are the requirements? How do I go and work with various functional groups within the company to be able to build a plan for going and realizing them? And I'm really proud of the people on our business development team for the work they've done to help to cast that vision, refine it with lots of feedback, and then use it to be able to build something that has commercial application that we then can go and build deals with.
This may be answered by the partnership that you guys did last year with Studio, but if I were to ask you to imagine a Studio team that has people from all of the various Cornell Tech programs on it, where's the big opportunity in this space? What are the kinds of companies that kind of there's not good movement on the problems that need to get solved to really unlock the industry?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. So I would say there's lots of questions that we're going to continue developing better fidelity answers to through time. The big focus right now is around how do you design, develop, certify, and produce air vehicles that will meet or exceed these mission specifications and fit within the rule set that the FAA has prescribed in the United States, which largely is what's going to unlock this technology for deployment globally due to reciprocity rules that other countries enjoy or have in place with the FAA through the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. And so we focus a lot of our time on validating technologies that companies that are developing that would be in the realm of vehicle design. There are over 200 public efforts that are underway right now to develop these technologies. We're partnered publicly with 8 of them. We're really excited about those 8. We respect a lot of others that are out there too, and we follow their progress closely. I would say that outside of that, though, there's going to be all sorts of regimes that come forward. Think about insurance for these businesses. Think about vehicle financing. Think about ways to think about the operations, the maintenance, the repair, the overhaul, the way to think about the flows of electric charging systems that will support these vehicles. It's going to unlock a lot of economic opportunity for companies. And we're excited by the chance to partner at Uber because we're a technology firm and we're going to work with great folks that are doing other pieces of the puzzle. So for any entrepreneurs at Cornell Tech who are thinking about ways to plug in, there are all sorts of opportunities to dig into.
Cool. 2 last ones that sort of are nerdy, so I'll ask them and then we'll open up for questions. One is, so in our MBA program started at the beginning of the summer, and we just finished microeconomics and learned about platform economics. Yep. And the detrimental effects of stacked monopolies in a supply chain. Sure. And at the same time, learning about Uber, it makes so much sense to me that in order to have a VC funding structure, it needs to be sort of bitten into small enough pieces that there are just little companies that can have the capital they would need to really do this capital intensive investment or product development. And so I guess ultimately, if you fast forward that, it does start to look like a sort of supply chain that's just monopoly after monopoly of specialized components developed for this particular ecosystem. And then in that same panel that I watched, they talked about how and whether the industry will ultimately vertically integrate. Is Uber taking, equity stakes in key partners or in royalties in them, so that you have kind of a foot in the door to start to consolidate vertically as the market picks up?
Yeah, so Addie, super interesting question. So I would say our strategy is to think about this as a platform, largely based on the fact that we can help bring forward a lot of the demand that will help to de-risk this ecosystem for other participants. So it's one of the points you alluded to on that investor panel. We're not a world-class company when it comes to hardware manufacturing. We're not a world-class company when it comes to the work of investing in infrastructure. We're a software company. And so thinking about that being the place where we invest and that being the place where we make our bet, and then enabling technologies that are hardware companies, that are infrastructure developers, that's our strategy. I would say it's very early innings to project this is exactly what the form factor is going to look like. This is exactly what the way in which the value chain is going to develop and mature will be. We obviously have a perspective, and we've been very open with that perspective because we think it's to everyone's benefit to have our take out there and it be challenged by others and to make it all better. But I would say that our focus very much is on, again, the mission. How do we bring this to life in a way that's going to be safe and reliable, clean, affordable, and allow that type of scale over time? And so when you think about how you structure your business model relative to that objective, there's lots of benefit in staying quite open and quite flexible about how it will form, because you're going to turn more cards over and learn more information, and that will drive the planet in a different direction, allow us to create some more nuance to it through time. So I'd say that's the way we honestly think about it internally. And then the types of conversations that you're getting a chance to have in a microeconomics course are really fun to have, and I think good from a problem solving standpoint. They also need to acknowledge that there is a complexity to how new markets come together. And so that takes some time and some discovery to be able to determine as well.
Cool. And then my last question I would ask about is the role of the pilot. So I also did Teach for America and have subsequently done work with kids and around, future of jobs kinds of things. And in the eVTOLs that you guys have put forth to date, there's room for 4 passengers and a pilot. And so at scale, to be running, close to the United States air traffic on an hourly basis, that's a lot of pilots, and seems like a really cool job to have kids have in mind when they're in high school today. How many pilots do you expect to need in 5 to 10 years? And will you, are there parts of the ecosystem, maybe it's at Uber or other companies, that are developing that talent pipeline?
Yeah, that's a great question. Where did you teach?
I taught in the Bronx. I taught middle school science in the Bronx and had a similar experience of it just being incredibly rewarding and the most challenging.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. Well, thank you for your service there. That's a really important thing. So I agree with you. The opportunity for adult learning to be applied to this really important high skill, highly compensated activity around piloting these air vehicles is going to be a really exciting job opportunity for people. McKinsey & Company had a report that came out just a month ago around the overall need for commercial pilots to be both replaced at a higher rate as people exit the workforce who've been pilots for a long time, and as new needs come on board for not just the piloting of people, but also of things inside cities. And so their projection is over 400,000 new jobs created by the end of the decade. And what's really exciting about this technology platform is that the vehicle itself is going to come to life to the market with a very high level of autonomous capability. The fly-by-wire capability on the vehicle at the outset will be quite high. And so the appropriate standard to which you think about the competencies of being able to safely and reliably operate that pilot should be open to a lot of people. And so you think about where there is expertise around pilot training. Companies like CAE, who some may be familiar with, it's based in Montreal, but has relationships with all sorts of airlines and aircraft OEMs around the world. They're doing really impressive work around how to think about a capability set for the competencies needed to pilot these new vehicles. And it'll be really interesting to watch as they continue honing those capabilities to develop new technologies with virtual reality, with augmented reality, to be able to prepare more people for these jobs. That's one that I, like you, as a former educator, am really excited about what the possibilities can be, and would encourage people that have ideas around adult learning or around reskilling to get in touch if there are business ideas that people are excited about in that vein.
Cool. That's awesome. I guess the sort of counterpart to that question is that at the Urban Air Mobility Investment Panel, you asked what people are most eager to invest in, and everybody kind of unanimously said autonomous capabilities. And then one of the panelists, DFJ partner Mariana Senko, went as far as to say, I fundamentally believe that for the business cases to close in this ecosystem, you eventually need to move to fully autonomous aircraft. How far away actually is that, and what's the transition look like?
Yeah, so great question around the pathway to autonomy. I would say it's too soon to say, to put a specific date on the calendar and say, this is the date at which full autonomy is projected. I will say that most air vehicles today in commercial aviation have a very high level of autonomy on board, and it's actually very core to how to think about the concept of operations for most commercial air travel that any of us would take for a flight across the country. The majority of that flight is on autopilot.
Yeah.
I do think that there's an important role for the pilot, and especially from a certification standpoint and a public readiness standpoint. We're not yet at the stage of saying people are looking for a fully autonomous experience as they fly through their city. But the safety level and the scalability of an autonomous system is much higher than what humans in the loop are able to accomplish, just based on where cognitive load will be. And as you think about the advances in air traffic management, and using software to deconflict the way in which these aircraft are safely and reliably moving through an orchestrated network, that's something we're investing in at Uber. So I would say that by the end of this decade or early into the 2030s, it will be something that is happening at some interesting level of scale. There probably are heterogeneous networks of both piloted and autonomous vehicles deployed in parallel to one another over some time period before we're in a fully autonomous system. But it's definitely something to look for in the future. I would say that, the challenges of autonomy and self-driving on the ground are actually, I think, somewhat more complex than those in the air. In the air, you have more room to deconflict. You can hover if there's some event that needs to resolve itself. There's not a lot of examples of kids and pets and balls running across the road when you're flying through the air. So the complexity and the number of exogenous factors that can complicate autonomy on the ground are significant. And I think that based on the fact that aviation relies on autonomous systems in such a significant way today and will continue in the future, it creates a roadmap for autonomy that will be very realizable in the not too distant future.
Really cool. I'm gonna take a question from Omkar. It's logistically tricky to have people ask for themselves, so I'm gonna ask it for you, Omkar, but thank you for the question. In your pursuit to develop demand for the vertical lift market, which seeks to dwarf the existing vertical lift market, what are the top challenges you've faced? Have policymakers been enthusiastic to develop these ideas, or are there safety concerns?
Great question, Ankar. So I'll go back to what enables scalability. relative to the existing vertical lift market, which is largely helicopter driven. So again, the enabler of scalability is a much lower direct operating cost system born out of a much more easily maintained vehicle like the one that's rendered behind me. So direct operating cost is the first pillar. The second pillar is low noise, being able to operate at noise levels that are not nearly as disruptive to cities as helicopters have been traditionally. So the framework that already exists for certifying general aviation aircraft that are fixed wing and that people are working to develop today can be applied to certify this new class of aircraft. And I think the FAA deserves a lot of credit for being highly innovative and thinking through how existing rule sets can be applied in creative ways through a special exemption framework to be able to have the United States in a leadership role for this new industry. And that's been really, really fun to watch. It's been a privilege to be a part of as a part of the industry. And I'm a really big cheerleader for the folks at the FAA that are very forward thinking about how to bring that forward. That said, like, they have a safety mandate, as they should. And so the bar to be able to show a means of compliance that meets the very high level of safety that we expect in this country in commercial aviation and in countries around the world as a result is an important one. And it's one that I think that we have to hold people to in order to responsibly deliver the service. And so I would say on card that that is the driving constraint, how to think about certifying these vehicles. Again, there are over 200 companies that are innovating and thinking about ways to bring them forward. We're partnered with 8 at Uber, and we're really excited about the work that they're doing. We're excited to see what they bring forward in the years to come.
Another one from Mark is, does Uber Elevate have its own regulatory team that's focused on UAM?
We certainly do. So Mark, great question. We have a head of aviation policy. Her name is Danielle Rinsler. She sits in DC. She joined us after a really storied career at the FAA and has a lot of experience around airport policy, around the thinking through of infrastructure, of noise constraints, as well as experience around the safety provisions that we're looking to meet as an industry. We also have a head of safety, a gentleman named John Ilson, who joined us after a really storied career as a pilot himself. And then after years and years at working inside commercial aviation as a pilot, has then gone and done some really important work at ICAO, the UN General Assembly's effort to be a civil aviation authority that helps to drive rulemaking and policy coherence across the world, as well as in independent consulting practices himself. So he's a great leader on our team as well. And then in addition to the folks in the policy org and in the safety org, we have a lot of people on the engineering side who've got lots of experience thinking through the regulatory framework. And we're very active participants in a lot of industry groups that work alongside general aviation manufacturers or others in the industry that are thinking about infrastructure to be able to provide a perspective and seek and receive feedback around our approach to ensure that it is compatible with how both the regulations exist today and where they're going in the future.
Phil has a question about how much of your role as a business development leader is setting strategy versus selling strategy to partners?
That's a great question, Phil. So I would say that the question of setting strategy and implementation is iterative. And so you put a vision out for the future, you develop a strategy to execute on that vision, you begin going and doing that execution, you get feedback. And as you get feedback, you adapt your approach to be responsive to the signal that you get. And so that's been definitely true of our team over the last 3 years. I think that if you were to go and read the Uber Elevate white paper from October 2016, the strategy remains the same. We are very much focused on how we as a software company that has vision and visibility into consumer demand can help shape a product offering that other people will go and build to and that we can deploy as partners. That's consistent. I think the thing that we've gotten much smarter about and much more sharper on has been the learning that you generate through tests and the learning that you generate through early pilots is really helpful for refining the exact way in which you're offering. And so a big credit to the team in New York City for Uber Elevate, who's worked to craft this product, Ubercopter. And we have been shuttling people from Lower Manhattan to JFK Airport and back over the course of the last year. We paused that effort during the COVID era and use that as a way to reflect and retool. But that's been really, I think, useful for us in saying, great, like here's a set of learnings. We now can apply these learnings to refine the way that our product is taking shape. We can segment differently. We can think about the place we're going to invest differently. And then we'll get more input. And as that input comes in, we'll refine our strategy more. I think that's an important lesson to learn to apply to any entrepreneurial effort that someone might take on.
Two questions pointing towards how do you pick the locations for where you want to launch your pilot cities. One is asking, does Uber plan to consider geographies outside of the United States and emerging countries as a target market? Is there an air or road traffic threshold that Uber Elevate considers when you're identifying target cities and markets? What's your process for picking?
Yeah, so market selection is a really important question, and there are a lot of inputs that inform it. I would bucket the inputs into both supply side factors and demand side factors. So on the supply side, you have questions like airspace accessibility, questions around like what are the constraints that are posed by regulatory environment, and is the regulatory environment supportive and ready for this new class of vehicle, or is there work to be done as it relates to that? Beyond airspace, there are questions around sort of climate conditions. What is the ultimate sort of rate of flyable days, of course, across the year? Or is there a high propensity of storms and wind and days that make it much more difficult to fly? Mm-hmm. So we ask those questions, and we have a rigorous process for which we score and rate different markets based on supply constraints. On the demand side, they're largely questions around what is the underlying population, what is the ability and willingness to pay for the more premium type of aviation services that like this likely starts at as a market before utilization rates allow us to drive that price down. Also, what are the ways in which we're going to be able to deploy in partnership with others? What does the existing network of relationships look like for Uber as a rides business? Because it's really important to solve the first and last mile connection of getting someone from their home, office, place of entertainment to one of these infrastructure nodes. We fly them to another infrastructure node. We need more ground vehicles to take them the last mile. So what does that look like? Do we have a robust network to deploy into? We publicly announced Melbourne, Australia as one of the first international launch markets that we're excited to deploy. It meets or exceeds a lot of those tests. Lots of flyable days, great weather conditions, a supportive regulatory environment that has high levels of reciprocity with the FAA, supportive partners on the ground side of the business. We have a really active and growing rides business and eats delivery business in that part of Australia. And so it's an example of a place where we think we can really grow through time. We certainly are interested in other international markets though, and our team follows and tracks them closely. I'm excited to see this take shape in the years ahead as a truly global business.
You say Melbourne very well. So you're well
on the way.
One more from Matthew Montorelli. Where do you expect the business for Elevate to come from? People currently relying on public transit, on their own cars, replacing taxis. What's the thinking?
Yeah, another really good question. So when we think about this market, the core consumer for an Uber Elevate trip is someone who's wanting to take a longer trip inside a highly dense and congested city, mm-hmm. for whom the time savings offered by this trip more than offset whatever the premium cost might be to take that trip at the outset. Mm-hmm. So think about someone who's looking to get from an airport into a city center. Think about someone who's wanting to take a trip that is a commute, but in excess of 20 miles inside a city where that ground leg might be over an hour and a half or 2 hours. We can deliver time savings that more than reduce the cost of the time associated with that trip by 50%. And those are the people for whom this product is going to make the most sense in its early instantiation. And over time, as we drive more utilization, as we amortize the cost even lower, as autonomy becomes more widely adopted, as manufacturing rates achieve scale, they'll look much more like automotive and much less like the more modest rates of production that have historically been seen in the aviation industry. We'll be able to drive the price even lower. And then you open up new markets as you drive the price lower. And this can become something that's more of an everyday experience for someone who's looking to take a trip in excess of 10 or 15 miles inside a city. And we'll get there through time. But it likely starts with something that's a bit more of a premium service, supply constrained because the number of vehicles that are out there is relatively limited. And then with time and experience, we drive that price point down. It becomes something that looks much more like UberX on the ground. And then we begin unlocking new market segments as we grow. And it becomes something that is a supplement to forms of mobility across cities around the world.
When you say it looks like sort of like UberX on the ground, does that mean price point wise?
Correct. So a couple of points of reference. The Uber Black price in most cities is somewhere on the order of around $6 a passenger mile. And so if you think about, a trip that is around 10 miles in duration, it's about $60 that you would expect on a per seat basis for that trip. If you think about a load factor that, includes, 50% of the seats being filled, right? Then for a 4-passenger vehicle, you've got 2 people on average who are there, and you can do the math about what that implies for in terms of a ticket size for the full vehicle. Over time, we believe we can get to a price point that's much more like Uber X on the ground, which is more in the range of like $2.50 in most US markets. And so you cut about half of your cost out of the system as you drive higher utilization, as you drive more throughput of people across the same sort of fixed cost base, which allows for a much lower price per user over time.
And David had asked, what's the time frame when you'll start to have these be in the skies?
Yeah, so again, looking back to the question that was asked earlier around what the driving constraint is, it's largely the certification of these air vehicles. We are on pace as an industry to have the first certified units come as soon as 2023. And we're working with manufacturers who are in flight test programs right now, who are testing these vehicles to show the level of safety that, again, meets or exceeds the needs of compliance that are out there in the framework for certification today. We would say that people should expect the early scale, like very modest operations around that time frame. And then around the middle part of this decade, you would start to see expansion of that into different markets, such that by the end of the decade, this was something that was widely adopted in large cities across the world.
I think we'll do one more question from Vince, that helicopters don't take off of skyscrapers anymore in New York generally, since there was, I guess, a big MetLife helicopter accident in the 70s. How do you overcome that sort of social phobia to make?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Commonplace. Yeah.
Yeah, and when tragedies like that happen, there are policy responses, as there should be. And I think it's important as an industry to show a commitment to safety that allows for that scalability. So today, there are 3 infrastructure nodes on the island of Manhattan that can service these trips. There's one on the west side, there's one on the east side, there's one around Wall Street. And that is a limiting factor as it relates to where we can drive throughput of these trips. It will need to expand through time. At the outset, though, we'll expect to operate on existing aviation infrastructure. And prior to the coronavirus, we were operating off of the Wall Street heliport, which is fairly proximate to Battery Park on the southern tip of Manhattan. The benefit Uber has is we have this network of ground vehicles that can pick people up from places on the interior of the island and then shuttle them to those locations, and then use software to be able to seamlessly integrate the legs of that trip. So you as a user don't have to worry about where exactly is the helipad, where exactly is the location where I have to check in. We solve that problem for you. And then we're able to use the software to batch people together, drive a higher utilization rate for each vehicle, and then pass those savings along to the rider so that we can allow people to access this, which is traditionally been a pretty expensive service, at a price point that's much more accessible. So it's a great question. My team's goal is to use business development to expand the number of infrastructure nodes that will be accessible through time. but we'll start with what exists, and we'll use that as a way to show the safety case and grow it responsibly as we move forward.
Really cool. Wyatt, we're almost out of time, but thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And I'm sure I can speak for many of my classmates in saying that I very much hope that we get to see you in our studio curriculum again later this year.
Most certainly. Again, Addie, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the great questions. And I look forward to the chance to get to know the organization better. Again, at Uber, we have a really high impression of Cornell Tech. We're excited for the relationship. We want to grow it through time. And so we hope to be invited back.
Thank you, Wyatt. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
On behalf of everyone.
So
Yeah.
I'm planning to hang around for the virtual coffee.
Yes.
I've got a sandwich for lunch over here.
Oh,
it's hard
right.
to see it with my virtual
Time
background.
zone. Yes.
Yeah, so a little bit earlier today in San Francisco.
This is meant to be for the students to get a chance to hang out with you. So, but I'll, again, the t-shirt will be coming your way, and hopefully we'll be in touch, and we'll see you in studio at some point.
Great.
That's good.
Sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we're going to go to a separate Zoom for the conference.
Exactly.
So we'll wrap this one up. But
it has
thank you
to.
again for the invitation.
The professor has to be kicked off first, then the separate Zoom can start. So I'll be ending this. I'll be ending the webinar now. Addie, if you want to quickly say a thank you, and then I'll leave.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's inspiring to hear what sort of this gigantic and enormous sense of possibility can do to sort of just walk in and say, we want to make this happen, and catalyze an enormous ecosystem around it filled with innovation. So it's a really inspiring way to start off this series, and really look forward to working more with Uber Elevate in the year to come. So yeah, let's go and have coffee.
Yep.
See you in a second.
Thank you.
That's great. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
See you over there on the line.
Bye.